This is Griff Ruby, the Nostalgic Catholic, continuing my first book review, Isaac Asimov's Foundation, and I'm making a series of this by treating each of the volumes in the sequence that it all came out. Well, obviously, the Foundation and Empire left us with the Foundation plan in ruins, and the only hope is this other mysterious entity now known as the Second Foundation. And we know it's out there, but the only person who was able to figure out where it was got killed before he could tell anybody what he knew. So the next part here, of course, is going to be the search for the Second Foundation, and hence the title of the other book. Again, that was also included in this very worn-out omnibus volume of the trilogy. Now here, in this case, it's that one there, the Second Foundation. In this case, just a little show and tell here. I do happen to have the original Gnome Press edition with the cover on it, so that's kind of neat to see. And so that's really something else. Something else to have. Let's see, but it reads the same. It's still a little bit different, though. Not as much as some of the earlier segments. You still don't have. I think you still don't have an Encyclopedia Galactica. Yeah, I think you don't have Encyclopedia Galactica. I think you have. Yes. Yeah, you still got Essays on History by Lidger and Veer, whose name totally disappears from the book. But this is a cover story, and Now You See It is what it was called. And this is the first part. And this is in this one, the mule, knowing about the Second Foundation. So let's just say he was able to eavesdrop on some of these other conversations and had some idea what was going on. That there was a Second Foundation and it might be able to defeat him. Well, then I'm going to do something about that, says the mule. And so he does. Well, the mule works with this guy named Bale Chanis, who hasn't been converted. A little dial change, the mule had this power with his mind. He could see your brain as like a little dial, and he could just turn that little arrow in your mind and hate into love or whatever, so that it's hatred and revulsion into loyalty. He could do this to you, But there was this guy who was willing to work with the mule and didn't have to be specifically converted. He was just really smart and was willing to work with the mule. So it made him the perfect person, because he was smart. He was known for being lucky. Usually good instincts are kind of an indication that maybe he might be able to help the mule figure out where the Second Foundation is. And they focus on this world here that's almost at the opposite end of the galaxy, physically speaking. And because it's got there's a main world that's called Tazenda, and it sounds kind of like, could that be a corruption of Starzend? Tazenda? Yeah, it could be. It's not directly opposite, but it's only a few degrees off from the center. I mean, if you drew a line from Terminus to the middle of the galaxy, the other side, Tazenda would be some degrees off. Actually, a fair number, maybe 20 or 30 degrees off. But it's still kind of the other side of the galaxy, physically speaking, see. So they go to Tazenda, Bale Chanis and the mule and some of the mule's men, including Hans Pritchard from the previous volume. And they're trying to see if there's some sort of a Second Foundation. They find very low technology, but that's reasonable because, after all, it's Foundation 1 that's highly technological. Foundation 2 is mentalist. They develop the psychology, the mathematics, the psychohistory. They know all that. They've got this mental stuff, this intellectual stuff. See, unlike Foundation 1, that's all material sciences and nuclear power and widgets and gadgets and spaceships and stuff like that. So that could be consistent, but the mule is still so afraid of the Second Foundation. He doesn't even go straight to Tazenda, but he decides let's find one of those little worlds kind of nearby that's kind of a vassal to it, because maybe, we could get kind of a view of the main world from this other little world called Rossum. So they land on this place of Rossum, and they meet up with the elders and this and that. And not much seems to happen here. Until it kind of turns out that Mule has known all along that Bale Chanis was a second foundationer. I'll give that little spoiler away. He wasn't really unconverted, he was a member of the second foundation. And the Mule thought, let's just see if he can lead us to it. He'll lead me there, and then he'll get them to conquer me. And all the way through, this is a neat thing they introduce in the second foundation here. They have these little interludes. Second foundation, these little discussions. There's this room where second foundation has their meeting somewhere on some place. We don't know where it is. And there's these people who talk. And I mean, if ever there was just people talking in rooms, it's the second foundation. But it's really pretty interesting, people, the only names anybody have is the first speaker says this, the second speaker says that. It turns out later on, that seems to be the titles that people have in the second foundation. And that the most powerful person in the second foundation is whoever it is that has the role or office of being the first speaker. He speaks first at any of their gatherings, and I guess maybe also last, and gets in the last word because he's more or less in charge more than anybody else is. And he has to be the best and the most wise and knowledgeable of understanding the plan, and also the most truly in love with the plan. So, but at this point, first speaker could just be, there's people in a room, and first person to speak says this. The second person, it almost sounds like that. You can really believe that. Oh, he's on his way now. Okay, well, our plan's in place, kind of stuff. That's about all. So you kind of get this tiny insight. The second foundation does know the Mule's coming. They're prepared for him, and so forth. So they're in gear. They've been informed. Word has somehow found its way to them that something needs to be done about this Mule character. So they're looking for him. Now, a lot of people think, it's here. No, it's there. No, it's here. No, it's there. And we'll get a little more of that in the final part of Second Foundation. I'm still on the first part, the Now You See It part. And in there is a rather interesting scene. I don't know how you would do this in a film, but I think it could be really cool. Is that Hans Pritcher has been a Mule's man because the Mule did his little brain dial and made him a loyal servant and loving the Mule, where he naturally would have hated and despised the Mule. Kind of shades of like, what was that, the Puppet Master, the creatures, on your back and controlling your brain. You want to do what it tells you to do and not what you do, not what you would want to do. It's kind of like that kind of thing. It's purely mental from the Mule to the person he controls. And the Mule is trying to zap Bale Chanis. And meanwhile, the first speaker has come in at the end, has come into the room there. He's come into where the Mule is meeting up. And Bale Chanis ends up revealing, actually Rossum is the world. You see, it is where the second foundation, not actually presented itself with this little vassal world, really hide it, super hidden. And the Mule's all, oh, that's where it is, and we're going to conquer this world. And it probably does too, I don't know. But that's not really where the second foundation was. But Bale Chanis, the second foundation, really thought it was, because they worked with his brain and made him believe it so thoroughly that the Mule could convince him of that. That it would look in his brain and see that. See, and then the Mule wants to shoot, I think, Bale Chanis, but the first speaker is trying to prevent him, but he's also got to continue trying to control Hans Pritcher. But there's too many people here. He can't control everybody all at once. And so as the Mule is focusing on one person, Hans Pritcher is losing that control of that dial and suddenly regaining that hatred he has for the Mule. Oh, now he's ready to blast the Mule out into extinction. So that's, you just see this transfer of power or something like that, purely mental, intellectual, psychonic, I don't know, some weird power that they have within themselves. You see how that goes. So that's kind of a cool thing. But the bottom line is, Tazenda is not where the world is, nor is its little vassal world, Rossum. They were just leading the mule on a merry goose chase, and that's all. The mule gets zapped by the Second Foundation, and from there on he goes back home and doesn't try to expand his little mule's kingdom any further. And then you get the last installment, and it's called Now You Don't. Once again, it's a cover story, and this girl here is very, very important. She's one of the main characters, and it's kind of neat. One of the first really strong female characters in Isaac Asimov's writing. In fact, a lot of his stuff, the female characters barely even count for much of anything. This girl is totally new and different. Kind of based, I think, somewhat on his own daughter, who's beginning to become a very strong mind. It's a very long segment. It continues into the December 1949 edition, no cover this time, and then further even into the January 1950. So the final denouement of the original Foundation trilogy is first seen by the reading public in January of 1950 when this issue comes out. Again, it doesn't get the cover, but it's inside. And in here, now it's we got this other group of people that are trying to establish some way of, because now the mule's been taken care of. Now you have a new problem. The first Foundation now knows something they weren't supposed to know at this time in history, namely that the Second Foundation is actually this mentalist power, you see, somewhere else in the galaxy, and clearly powerful enough to stop the mule, which they weren't. So it's something they're worried about. On the one hand, they want to be protected by it, but on the other hand, they're kind of afraid of it because, its purposes are not known. It might be corrupt. They might want to take over. And if they can conquer the mule, they could certainly conquer the First Foundation. That's a real concern, They're really worried about this. So now they need to go looking for the Second Foundation and be able to convince themselves that they've done something about it. So you get these group of men who keep gathering very secretly together. And meanwhile, one of the main guys of that has this daughter who's been listening in on their meetings with this little equipment she borrowed from a nerdy boyfriend or a nerdy kid in school that she knows, and she gives him just enough attention that she can borrow this really neat apparatus that will allow her to listen to what's going on. And she's listening in on all this stuff, and she's got her own romantic ideas. So she just suddenly runs off. They're going to send this one guy, a librarian, to this certain planet where the mule last ruled. And he's a hobbyist in everything relating to the mule, so it's a perfectly natural thing for him to go. But she decides to stow away with him. And they decide to roll with that punch. They're going to have her be there. Just let her be there, with Uncle Homer. Okay, thanks, Daddy. I'm really having a grand time here in Caligan with Uncle Homer. He's been very good to me, and we're having a wonderful time. We'll see you when I get back, okay? Don't be worried, Daddy. I'm okay. And that's how he finds out that she's stowed away. So they just decide to roll with it and pretend, that was all part of the understanding. Homer Mirror is going to go to Caligan, where the mule had last ruled from, and go through all the libraries and pour through all this other artifacts and things from the mule's time. The mule's now dead because it's some number of years still later on. And she gets involved in all this stuff. But then all of a sudden, things are turning against him. They're going to send Homer home back to Terminus. And she officially really wasn't even supposed to be there. And then she looks in the eyes of this one woman who's like the wife of the new guy in charge at Calgan. And she could just see in a glance that lady was a Second Foundationer. And she is scared. She is running scared. She doesn't want to go back home because they'll follow her or find her or something. So instead, she just doesn't know where to go and bumps into this farmer from Trantor. And the farmer and his wife, are there in this like So like a big intergalactic bus depot kind of thing. Only you got the buses are rockets that go all over. So that's kind of cool. And they had this really neat scene where there's this grid of these weird 10 by 10 squares of energy come down, and stop at about waist level. You don't go over that. And so inside each square, they can make sure they get all the people in there and check who they are and where they are. And they even get to the square where she is with these two farmers, and they kind of bribe the guards and let her pass. But later on, turns out the guards were under order merely to see where she was going, not actually capture her or do anything like that. So they still got what they wanted. And so she's gone to Trantor, and it's kind of safe there for a while. And then she has this little knowledge here, this idea. And the farmers say, well, we might have some business on Terminus, one of these days. Is there any message you'd like us to bring to your father? Yes, 7 little words. So she gives him the 7 little words. Well, I don't know what that means, but okay, I'll carry your message. And so he does. And it finally ends at the end where you got all these people. And this is kind of where you have most of this. It's here. No, it can't be here. It must be here. No, it can't be here. It must be here. And so on and so on. And it kind of seems like a game. I mean, oh, it was actually on Calgon. It's got to be closer. No, it's actually on Terminus. No, it's someplace else. No, it's all these different speculations, theories people have. Where is the second foundation? What planet is their main planet? And they have all these ideas, and which one is it? Well, again, that too is a spoiler, so I'm not going to share that, but of course we find that out, and we also meet up with the first speaker, also as having a name. So that's kind of cool. So, some people think the second foundation's weaker. I don't. I really have enjoyed, that one as well a lot. And it's really kind of neat to see how the theories develop. People, why do they think it should be here and it should be there? Turns out that the little 7 words from young Beta Darrell, which is actually not Beta. Her name was something else. That's the mother, or grandmother actually, the bride that was researching the second foundation. This is falling out of my brain, but anyway, she's got these 7 words, and the 7 words are what made her father think one of the locations it might be. Okay, it's kind of clever. And that's basically the second foundation. It's kind of a search for the second foundation. And then presumably the first foundation has, they found this some sort of beam or energy, something they could do that would, if you were a mentalist with the powers of the second foundation, it would detect that, and it would be like give you this agony or whatever, destroy your mind, do something. If you're anybody else, it's like you don't even know it. So like, it's like a blinding light, really super bright enough to make you go blind if you've got eyes. But if you're a creature that doesn't have any eyes, all that light doesn't make a difference to you at all, so it doesn't affect you. So it's kind of like that. So it's kind of neat how they do that. They get rid of all these second foundationers. They killed off 50 of them and said, we're done. Well, like I said, to talk about it any further would be to get into spoiler territory galore, so I won't do that. Anyway, that's the second foundation. I think that's a really cool book, and you really get to love the girl's got a lot of spunk and spirit, and her character just totally dominates in this volume. And you like a strong young girl character in your book, this is it. Homer Mallow was pretty good. Salvor Hardin was pretty good. Yes, even Hari Seldon, what little we see of him, is kind of good too. Some of these other traders they're okay, but they're kind of minor players in all of this. But this, the bride and the groom are kind of interesting, kind of marital, I'd say marital bliss, but also marital brown moods and whatnot too. It's all there, and it's pretty neat. You know, because you could also see as these things were being written, Asimov was also going through changes in his own life. You know, when he started this thing, it was World War II. He was still single. He had been in the Navy or was still in the Navy. All this atomic stuff was secret, classified. And so what's really cool is that when the first book mentions plutonium, or it would have mentioned plutonium, well, it did in the book. But when it originally came out, it's praseodymium, a different element. You know, I guess was plutonium was classified, or I don't know. They didn't know. It's kind of cool. So that's another one of those little changes. So I think that's enough. Second foundation.